Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Lon. Welcome to Time Out with Tinseltown Mom. I'm here today with Marguerite Connelly, author of the memoir Addicted to the Addicted, a mother's tale of going from heartbreak to hopeful. Today, Marguerite will talk about her addiction battle with her son and prayerfully encourage other parents along their journey. Hi, Marguerite. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate you being on. I know this is a very tough subject, so I appreciate you talking about your story. So before we get into the deep parts of this conversation, can you just tell us a little bit more about you, how you grew up and your family dynamic?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I say that I've been a product of addiction since I'm a toddler because my mother was an addict. And then, of course, in turn, she marries my stepfather, who was very abusive to us, abusive to my mother. So there was no way of getting out of that. Fast forward, I met my ex-husband when I was 12. I married him when I was 22. I divorced him when I was 26, all to just try to get out of my house. I didn't want to be in my home anymore. My ex-husband became an alcoholic at 18 back then. Drinking age was 18. So, he played catch up and he never stopped drinking since. So at 26, I said, I need more than this. At 22, I left him. I created a business that I did very well at, thank God. And I still have that same business today. And without it, I probably would not have been able to help my children with their addiction as much as I have. I bought a house at 26 years old by myself. So my kids had a normal upbringing, Catholic school. The only thing they didn't have was a father. And I think that really affected them. So
Mm-hmm.
having all these genetic dispositions of alcoholism, drug addiction, and then, the dynamics of no father or biological father, I think really affected them.
Right. Now, how many kids do you have?
I have two children. Timothy is 32 and Carrie Ann is 35.
Okay. And then the ex-husband, is that their father?
That is our father, yes.
Oh, okay. So you left and you were raising two kids on your own at that time.
Right, right.
Okay. So fast forward, tell us about your son, Timothy. Like, how did he grow up and, what sparked his interest in, was it alcohol or was it drugs?
Timothy was always strictly marijuana.
Okay.
But he started very young. He was 10 years old. And I later found out that it was a family member, a young family member that was a teenager that gave my son marijuana. From there, he was strictly marijuana. And then at 21, somebody gave him an opioid. So just when you think, you pass those teen years and now, oh, I'm scot-free, it doesn't happen like that. Because I would have never thought at 21, my son would become a heroin addict. So
Mhm.
from that opioid, he became a heroin addict, moving on to a poly addict that he would just smoke or do any kind of substance at that point. So the bottom line is, if it happens to me, it could happen to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, where's that family member today? Have you spoken to that family member who gave him the marijuana at 10 years old?
I have not. She is since deceased. She died very young, not from an overdose, thank God, but some other. Mhm.
Now, I don't know if you have the answer to this question, but there may be some parents who, just because you mentioned that, he was 10 years old when he tried marijuana, maybe they have a young child who's tried it and they're concerned about it. Like, would you have any words of wisdom there? Let's say their young person has tried marijuana and maybe they think it's innocent, and maybe, I guess it doesn't have to progress, but do you have any insight into that dynamic?
I know for me, going back 20 years, that I had zero help. I actually took Timothy to the emergency room because I knew something was off. He was sitting on the couch and he was non-responsive. And I took him to the emergency room and everybody thought I was this paranoid mom. And I said, no, I want him drug tested. Something is happening here, because I didn't know what he had in his body. Was it just pot? Could it have been angel dust? They would not drug test him. My
Oh,
daughter had come in, his sister, who was 13 at the time, and, she said, oh, he needs a bag of potato chips. And looking back now, it's like not one person said this is what you need to do. There was not enough information back then, and there probably still isn't enough information now, because we're really not, I don't think the focus is on our educating our younger generation. I think they're trying to clean up this mess of addiction, and they're forgetting about our children in the middle, where marijuana is becoming legal. So you walk the streets, anywhere you go, you're smelling marijuana. And what do the kids think? Oh, this is cool. This is okay. So
Yeah.
we're really not focusing on that. But I did do everything I could. Here in New York, we have what's called day top for some kind of education for addiction and stuff like that. He was in drug court, but the system doesn't work. Uh, they're supposed to go to drug court, see this person, and they're supposed to give you a drug test. And he knew enough, but this is fast forward, I'm sorry, till when he was about 15 or so. And, if they would swab his cheeks, he'd fill his cheeks with water, because he knew when the swab went in, he had water sitting here, and that's what they were getting. And you learn all this stuff that you're baffled with.
Yeah.
And, he would have his friend fill a condom with urine. And then when he would go in the bathroom, he would pee, use their urine. So they know what the tricks of the trade, but it's just so hard to say. Each child's
Different.
autonomous and different. The family dynamics are different. Some people may have money, some people may not have money. And it's all up to the child if they don't want to smoke or do drugs.
Yeah. So going back to your son at 10 years old after that incident, what did you notice after that when he was still young like that? Did he want to try it on his own? Like, how did that spiral, I guess?
He continued. He would not stop. He just got smarter. He'd put drops in his eyes. He would try to hold himself as if he wasn't stoned. And everywhere I went, it was the same thing. What are you worried about? It's only marijuana. What do you mean it's only marijuana? It's like, and sooner or later, it is a stepping stone. It leads to something else sooner or later.
Yeah, right. Okay, so from 10 years old, he was smoking marijuana. Would you say that he got addicted to marijuana, then he graduated to the next level?
At 21, somebody
At
gave
21,
him
okay.
a different, gave him an opioid at that
Right.
point.
Was he able to complete high school and graduate and, just live a normal life during that time, or?
No, nothing. He was
Okay.
non-functioning.
No, okay.
He wanted marijuana so badly that him and a friend were on the train, and they went up to a kid and they took his money. The kid gave him $20. They gave him back 10 because they felt bad. And the police found them smoking marijuana. They got a nickel bag, and they were on their way to Wendy's to buy cheeseburgers. So this is, as a teenager, how badly he needed that marijuana. So when people
Wow.
say it's not addicted, it really, people are just so easy breezy on it. No, it's not the truth.
See, that's always been my question too, because ever since they legalized marijuana, I'm in California, I smell it everywhere too. It really angers me because I feel like these companies are trying to get our kids used to that smell. So it's like no big deal. And I've often wondered that too, like, is marijuana addictive? And I've gotten different answers on that as well, especially a young person smoking it or however they ingest it. So you're saying that your son was addicted to it?
Oh, I believe he was. I think the difference in the marijuana when my son was 10 or 15, 16, 17 is there's so many different kinds now. So maybe before a teenager graduates to an opioid or fentanyl, they'll dabble in all the different kinds of marijuana they have. They'll have a smorgasbord of different types.
Yeah. So I know from just reading a little bit more about you, you've been a really strong advocate for your son. Can you speak on that a little bit? Like, you've really been there trying to help him out of this crisis. So at 21, what was your involvement with trying to get him help during that time?
So he was arrested many times. So I kind of relied on the court system's help. I'm just a mom with an out of control child. I'm a single parent. My ex-husband would say, well, you can't blame me because I just wasn't around. So it couldn't have been my fault. So that's what I was dealing with. But I tried everything. At first I didn't want him in jail. Like this little kid, this tiny little thing in Rikers. But he, for some reason, fit in there. Um, then, in the beginning, I was scared and I would take him to detox and rehabs, and they would give a letter. Tim is going to rehab out of state, and the judge would allow it. Okay, no problem. But he never finished. The court system never checked up on him. And when they did, it was only 60 days in jail, and then he was out again. Just to repeat the same process. And then as he got older, I sent him from state to state because they always said, get him out of his neighborhood. He's with the same kids, doing the same drugs. He knows where to get the drugs. Um, Sent him to Florida, sent him to California, sent him to Arizona, sent him to Texas. So how many places could I have sent him to, or how many different states? And it was always the same thing. I would put him in a rehab, pay $20,000, $30,000, and they would throw him out 2 days later. Don't get me wrong, he knew exactly what to do to get thrown out, but they wanted to keep my money. I said, you can't keep all that money. You didn't provide a service. You didn't do anything to earn that. And this happened 4 or 5 times. And this is when I started writing Addicted to the Addicted. I said, I cannot be the only one. I said, it can't be. And then I said, I have to go back and sue these people. And what they relied on was that I lived in New York, they were, let's say, in California. She's not going to come to California to sue me. So what I did was I learned that I could start the process of a lawsuit online. So as soon as they got that served, that I was suing them, they gave me my money back. So that was really a powerful statement. I said,
Yeah.
people need to know this.
Right.
But was always a huge advocate for him to help him stay clean, to the point where I was sick myself in doing that. I would do things that on a normal day basis I wouldn't do. I found my son detoxing on his couch, and I was on my way to yell at him because he had stolen some of my checks from work. And he was sick, the rocking, the chills, the sweating. I said, Tim, what can I do to help you? And he says, I can't believe you want to help me after what I did to you. I said, I love you. I'm your mother. What can I do? I had to actually take my son, give him $20, and have him buy Suboxone from his drug dealer. Suboxone, for those that don't know, it helps with the withdrawal. It makes them feel good for a time being. So he breaks the pill in half, he takes it, and he feels better. He saves the other half for later. However, looking back, I should not have done that for him. I did him a disservice because he should have felt that pain. He should remember this is what happens when you do drugs, right? So if I wasn't allowing him to feel that pain, I wasn't allowing him to really work on himself and his sobriety.
Wow.
So there were things that I did, but in hindsight, I know now I would never do that again.
Well, parents, I mean, their parents doing the same thing. I read a series of books. They're fictional books, but they were a series of books related to drug addiction based on the author's true story of her daughter who was addicted. But throughout the series of books, the mother did everything to get her daughter off the street. She lost jobs. She put her life and her son's life in jeopardy, trying to pull them out of crack houses. So I think there's parents out there now that are doing the same thing, really just stopping their lives. And maybe they have siblings or other children and they're being affected as well, as the parent is trying to get their child clean. And I know you've come to a revelation or realization, throughout this whole process. And we'll talk about that. How many treatment centers has your son been in?
So he's been in between 30 and 40. So I started this spreadsheet and I called it the Timothy Tracker. And I put from the time he was a young boy, when he was in treatment, whether that been a detox or rehab, jail, thrown out of apartment, and it's this huge spreadsheet. So when I say he's been in that many treatment centers, that doesn't mean he stayed for 30 or 40 days. That could be 2 hours or 2 weeks or a day.
Mm-hmm.
So he never really finished programs, maybe once or twice, but anything long term.
Mm-hmm. And in your experience, is that treatment centers don't work, or does it depend on the person?
I think if somebody wants to be clean, they can be clean without going to treatment. Treatment helps. It helps with the detoxing, the pain. It helps with therapy. You know, in the rehab world, they believe that there should be so much downtime and they shouldn't have stresses from the outside world. I think it's the opposite. I think the more downtime they have, the more time they have to think about substance and what they're missing out there or what they think they're missing out there.
Mm. Just in hindsight, and we'll talk more about where your son is today, but if someone's trying to get their child help, like what would you say to them, like how they should pursue this?
So find a foundation. I'm on the board of a foundation called the Hanley Foundation, and they give scholarships and they really want to help people with addiction. And they have relationships with so many different detoxes and rehabs where, let's say, a normal person would pay 20 or 30,000. In that relationship, they can pay a couple of thousand. So there are centers out there and there are places out there that you don't have to pay that much money for. And then there's always, the city hospitals. It's a little tougher to get in there. The problem is, if I brought my son to detox, if somebody's detoxing from drugs, it's not an urgency. If you're detoxing from alcohol, you're admitted right away. So we learned a trick of the trade that says, go to the liquor store, have your child drink a bottle of liquor, whether that be a malt 5, take him then to the hospital emergency room, and you tell them he's detoxing from alcohol, and then they admit them. So you learn all this stuff. And that's why I wrote this book, because the stuff I was learning from other addicts and parents was like, whoa, it's mind blowing.
Wow, that's really sad. Now, why would they take someone who's detoxing from alcohol, but not drugs?
You can die from alcohol.
Oh, okay.
You don't die from, but I said, what if he goes out and he shoots up and he overdoses?
Yeah.
What if, it just didn't make sense in my brain. But from what I'm told, an alcoholic can have a seizure, hit his head, they're more likely to die from detox.
Yeah. And I have a question for you. You don't have to answer this if you don't want, because we didn't talk about it before, but your daughter was a little older than her brother. Like, how was she handling all of this during these treatment centers and you trying to get him clean?
So just to let you know, my daughter is a recovering addict.
Okay.
She is clean 10 years. She was dating the neighborhood drug dealer, and I didn't know it. I thought he was the little, German boy around the corner, and she'd go have dinner, and she started changing. And as a teenager, she was late teens, I thought it was PMS, and I just wanted to choke her.
What did you think it was?
PMS. We know teenage
PMS.
girls.
Okay,
you know how they are. They're raging.
Yeah.
They're angry. And she just wanted to be with this guy, and he was right around the corner, and I would sit out there and just watch the house. Where is she? I wanted her to come home so bad. But when that relationship started going bad, he broke her on. He did some things to her that were horrible. And as a mother, you think you could get your child away of a bad situation. You can't. You just can't. So I had to wait. I had to do the wait and watch thing. Sooner or later, she woke up and she went after her own recovery. She went to her father's union. She demanded that they give her money for rehab, and they did.
Wow.
She went to AA. She did everything on her own. She wanted me to have nothing to do with it, and I could not be more proud of her. This is her last year in nursing school. She's going to be a registered nurse, mother of 3, and she's a success story. She's
That's
an
a
amazing
great
woman.
story. Yes, it
Hmm.
is. So she watched you trying to help her brother all those years, and she told you she wanted to do it on her own, and she did it.
She was angry with me. Um, she would tell me that I was going to love him to death. Um, my heart was just broken. Every
Yeah.
time I turned, I was just broken. You know,
Yeah.
you can't save your children. It's like, God, who am I then? Who am I if I can't save my children? You
Mm.
know,
So fast forward as your son, he's just going in and out of rehab and, you're watching this happen. Didn't you have an epiphany along the road?
I had a couple of epiphanies, and they began when I realized that my son was sick. And I realized that I was not doing him any justice. I was really not helping him. I needed to get out of his way. So I started going to Al-Anon and therapy. And I said, I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to show him that I'm going to take care of myself, because right now, all she's seeing is this crazy woman running around screaming out of control and crying in the closet. And I said, I'm going to talk about addiction every chance I can get. And I'm going to let my son live his life the way that he chooses to live it. And that's what it came down to. And
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be abusive, because I knew if I was abusive to him, like, you're a bum, you're not going to work, why are you doing drugs, where are you, why are you living like this? When I hung up the phone, I felt guilty. And then I would give him whatever he wanted, because I was filled with tremendous guilt. So I
Mm.
promised to myself that I wouldn't speak to him like that. I would speak to him like any other person.
Yeah. You spoke life into him instead of death.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I like that, yes.
So during this time, was he living on the streets? Was he living at home? What was that dynamic like?
There was a little of both. He never lived in my house when he got older, but I owned houses that I bought, that I rented, that he lived in, and it was just a horror. His
Mm.
living conditions were horrible. And then he was homeless for a while. He lived on Skid Row. Um, he lived in the streets in Arizona. He lived in Red Crosses. Like, it was just, he would sleep in people's car. It was just horrible.
Yeah. There may be some listening now who are at a crossroads with their child who's addicted. Maybe the child needs to be out of their home. Like, do you have any words of encouragement or anything that you could say to them?
I have friends who are living like this, and I constantly hear, my son is ruining my life. And I tell them, your son is not ruining your life. You are ruining your life. Your son is just a person that's sick. If he's in your house and he's disrupting your house and you have younger kids, you're allowing that. He should not be in your house if he's an adult disrupting your house. He should be out somewhere. So whether or not that is a sober living or rehab or just get out and find your own way is strictly up to the person with the addiction. It's up to them to take care of themselves, especially if, I'm going to say, past 18. We still look at kids at 18 as if they're little babies, but if they're big enough to go out and do hard drugs, steal, and live a life that we would never live, or we didn't even teach them to live like that, then you don't belong in my home.
Yeah. Now, would you do anything different when he was a teenager? Like, how would you do things differently?
I couldn't do anything differently.
Okay.
I believe there's absolutely nothing different that I could have done. And I believe that about every single parent that's trying to help their child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very strong and powerful testimony that you're sharing. Hopefully, it'll help some people out there. Can you tell us more in depth about your book? And this is a nonfiction. This is a memoir, right? That you wrote.
Yes, this is a memoir. So, like I said, the beginning is really about my childhood and the abuse that my siblings and I suffered because of my mother's addiction. If she had not had an addiction, she would not have been with an abusive husband. And then the arc is really my marriage and then leaving my husband and then my business and then never thinking in a million years that my children would have an addiction problem, you know? And then me coming to the realization that I really have to take care of myself, especially as a woman in her late 40s to 50s. I'm dealing with my own health issues. I was going through menopause. I found out I had a pituitary adenoma. So there's a point where I'm going to have a nervous breakdown, you know? So if Timothy is going to overdose, then that's on him. I can't watch him all day. So the only thing that I could do is take care of me and my husband in our own household.
Now, where's Timothy today?
He is out of state. He lives in South Carolina. He was in a treatment center that I call the Rat Park, and I write about that in my book. There was a TED Talk they did. They had a rat, and they put it in a cage, and they gave it a bottle of heroin. And every day the rat would go, and he'd get high and take the heroin from the water bottle. And all the time, 99% of the time, the rat died. Someone else came up and says, well, let's do another experiment. Let's take the same rat, build a rat park, put the rat in there, but we'll have other rats. We'll have a slide. We'll have a rat wheel. They put a bottle of heroin and a bottle of water. 99.9% of the time, the rat never went back for the heroin, went for the water. So I call it the Rat Park. He was in this treatment center, and there was a large community of houses all over. And no matter what my son's condition was, I knew somebody was there for him. So right now he's by himself, living alone, working in plumbing. I don't ask him. It's not my business. I don't want to know, because if I know I'm upset, I can't do anything about it. However, he's met so many friends there. If he chooses to and he wants help, he can get that.
Right.
So we need to have parents find what I call the Rat Park.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today, Marguerite. Where can people find you if they want to know more about maybe your story or even buying your book?
So the book is on Amazon. I have two websites, www.margueriteconnelly.com and www.addictedtotheaddicted.com, then, you know, the name of the book. And they can find me through there. If they have any questions, please feel free to email me.
Hey moms, thanks for listening today. If you enjoy this show, I would love to hear from you by way of an encouraging review. This podcast is meant to be a blessing to mothers, so I appreciate any support for this platform. Until next time.